Do you feel wired by a performative culture? A world that seems to want more and more from you? What if there was a different way? What would it look like to intentionally order our lives around practicing love? Today, Jasmine Bellamy joins Lisa and I on the hidden work of leadership. Jasmine describes herself as a love scholar practitioner who is a catalyst for business and culture transformation. She's the founder and spiritual director of Love 101 Ministries, which is dedicated to the theology and practice of love, and is the host of the Call to Love experience. She's also the former vice president of merchandising, planning, and allocation, and head of community and culture at Reebok, and the creator and co-facilitator of Courageous Conversations, a platform that inspires communal culture transformation. She is among Sports Illustrated's top 100 influential Black women in sports. So obviously, she's awesome, but she's also really inspiring to listen to and learn from. And the joyfully disruptive way she leads is the result of a lot of her own inner work as a person. I am so excited for you all to listen in today. Jasmine Bellamy, it is so good to have you here today.
So good to be with you both. Thank you for having me.
I think you might know by now that Lisa and I are like fangirls of you in all the ways. Isn't that right, Lisa?
Amen, sister.
And the feeling is so mutual.
I know. It's fun. It's fun when the feeling is mutual, and we get to say that and mean it. And yeah, thanks for coming on the hidden work of leadership. I know you to be somebody who is an incredible leader, a gifted leader, and a unique leader. You've got some unique thinking. I think we've all got our own unique stories. So we're really grateful that you would spend some time with us today and unpack a bit of that. So I'll get us started here. Jasmine, what do you, Jasmine Bellamy, uniquely bring to a leadership setting? Whether it's formal, informal, you go wherever you want. What do you bring?
There's one answer, and it's always the answer, and it's love.
Okay, help us. Like if someone's like, well, what does that mean? Help us know what that means.
I have been on my own spiritual transformational journey over the past 7 years. And if there's anything I've learned about that process, is that my purpose on this planet is love. And what I learned from putting love into practice, that it doesn't just change my personal life. It changes the context that I'm in. And so as someone who was a business leader, has been a business leader for the past 31 years, that means I showed up at work as a loving leader too.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, you can tell me if this is, just my hearing, but I just don't know that I've really heard very many people describe themselves aspirationally or factually as a loving leader, right? I mean, do you hear that very often, Lisa?
No, very rarely, in fact. Kind, gracious, humble, but love, not so much. And I just want to say, Jasmine, you exude it. There may be a few people who end up watching this rather than listening to it. And I'd encourage you to do so, just because Jasmine's whole countenance just exudes this joy and love that's worth observing, at least in the virtual environment. It changes everything, changes the whole room.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, so part of what we want to do in this podcast is unpack a bit of how you came to this place. Like, Lisa and I have just said, and we're underscoring here, you show up uniquely. It's a bit of a unique posture, and as a loving leader. So we're going to unpack in a little bit kind of what that means theoretically, but now we want to know how you got there. So for those listening, the premise of this whole podcast is that the very best leaders are people who engage the very difficult hidden work, the inner work, especially when seasons are tough, when challenges are looming, and when complexity is there. But this kind of work, I mean, it's not something that's always on display. We don't always get to see it. It's done with a trusted few. Sometimes it's done in fit and starts, or because we totally fell on our face, or because we look in the rearview mirror and think, I really wish that would have played out differently. So this whole podcast is about inviting leaders who we respect and who we know on to help us unpack some of the work they've done. This season 1, is all about unpacking that hidden work when life has been in flux, when things have been changing, when there's been a transition, when something's disruptive, whether that's at work, in your personal life, maybe both. So Jasmine, can you tell us about a time when your life, your leadership, your work felt like it was in flux and how that's shaped you?
Yeah. I'm going to actually start with a personal story because that really was the pivot point for me. I had been married 22 years and over, a significant investment in time to do my own inner work, really found that I was just in an unloving place. And that as a mother, at the time, a middle schooler and a high schooler, I knew that I would be doing a great disservice to them if they thought what they were experiencing was love. And so I was keenly aware of the generational impact of my choices. And so I decided to leave. And I will tell you that was the entry point. So, I definitely see it as a death, but what I'm living in is the new life on the other side. And this life that I'm living right now, like I think back to Lisa's kind words as we began, that life didn't exist before that moment. And so for me, I remembered hearing very distinctly that there is love that you have yet to understand. And I believe, while I can look back and I can see the seeds, that to me was the moment where I started to long for this other love that I didn't know. And a few months later, a question came to me about what would it be like to live a life of love the way God intends. And I remember saying at that moment, how is it that I've been in the church my entire life and no one has ever asked me that question? Or I've never heard a sermon that even speaks of that. And why have I never asked that question? And so in a conversation I was having with someone actually earlier today, I began living the question. And I began to cultivate what I now call a love practice. And the love practice, I define it as the intentional ordering of your life around love. And in that intentional ordering, many things happen. when you really become love student and and when I say I became love student, this ministry that I ended up creating as a result of all of this, Love 101, which is dedicated to the theology and the practice of love. I looked at love everywhere. It wasn't just scripture. It was the poets. It was other faith traditions. It was culture. It was philosophers everywhere, psychologists everywhere. I was looking at all of these things or all of these perspectives about love. And given my faith tradition, everything pointed me right back to the church. But what I learned also was that it's not, it's hidden. It's hidden. And I have, I in many ways embody the mystery that things are hidden in plain sight. And so I have just really leaned in for a whole year, just making love a study. And in a year later, really feeling compelled to start to share what I was learning with others, because it literally was changing my life from the inside out. And I remember interviewing for I was a finalist selected by our state attorney general for a chief diversity officer role for a school that had had a very public racial incident. And I remember as I prepared for that interview and talked to all of these stakeholders, I realized, even as I sat around the table with 10 people interviewing me, that what I was doing was practicing love. And that was when I realized this was just not about my individual life transforming, but it was about how I transformed any space I entered. And that then walked with me into another corporate role at Reebok in 2019. And that's when I really showed up as the loving leader. And I do want to just share something else, because I know that your audience is very centered in work and leadership. I have also navigated job loss and layoffs and all of those things as well. It just so happened that divorce was the pivot point that has shaped me into where I am right now. But I had no idea when I became Love Student in 2018 or 2017, if you want to call it that, that in 2020, it would converge into my leadership at work. There's no way I would have seen any of that. And so, now I have this great fortune of being able to look back and see the impact of what a loving leader can do. Not only transforming the context and their employees and their teams, but also themselves. So that's kind of my the opening of this journey of love and leadership for me.
Yeah, I love your story, and I have a question that's sort of burning for me. You work at Reebok. I don't know if you're still there, but you were there for a long time, and you have a background in retail merchandising, and we share that. I don't know if you know that, but that's where I spent the first 15 years of my career. And I would say that retail merchandising, and I did the work on the wholesale side as well, it is not a loving environment. We used to say, my colleagues and I used to say in retail, one day you're a peacock and the next day you're a feather duster, right? Like you're only as good as yesterday's numbers. And so how did you bring that love into an environment that is typically so unloving and harsh? Even, not all of them are toxic, but they're highly anxious usually, and very, very intense in a way that's not always healthy for people. And I'm curious how your loving presence as a leader and how you moved with your people shifted some of that.
First of all, I love that we share that background. And you described spot on my lived experience. I'll start first by saying I was always seen as a good developer of people. Always, back in, the early days of my career, when I first became promoted to buyer, developing people was always my strength. However, becoming a loving leader, it transformed to a very different place. And I would argue in some ways, I was always, good to people and focused on results and driving the P&L. Yes, check all of those things. But something different happened as a loving leader. One, I showed up fully myself with, I was not concerned about conforming. I came in with a confidence of what I know I can contribute, and a belief in the creative, transformative power that was in me and the results that I've driven. So I didn't come in, looking to prove myself or to be like other people, or, so coming to work as my full self was really the first step of it. But I inherited a team that really had been overlooked in a lot of ways, just in terms of where they were situated within the organization. And I walked in really focused on seeing them and really getting to know the humans that I was working with. This was a team that hadn't been promoted, and so they had a lot of resentment for that, rightfully so. And I really went to work on working alongside them. And so I really deconstructed the hierarchy in that sense, and that it was all about us working together. Like, yeah, sure, I was the VP, but it was about what we did together as a team, and understanding my strength from a strategic perspective, understanding my strength on solving complex problems and connecting the dots, and also relying on their strength as understanding the history and all the things that had come before. I was the new kid on the block, and respecting them and just really being about the collaborative spirit that we could of the beauty of what we could do together, what we could co-create together. And that just changed things. I was an advocate for them. I took time with every single person on my team, even the summer interns, and even the brand new right out of school, assistant buyers. And I sit with them and I know their story and I understand what it is that they're interested in. And so that when I'm in rooms that they're not, I can say, you know what, I think this person could be really good for that job. Or I've seen this, and I could advocate for them and amplify their stories. But I also got to know them as humans. And so I knew, we could talk about their kids and the things they were doing over the weekend. And so there's just so many examples of that. And I love the idea of being an illuminator. And that was a lot of what I brought to the table. But I tell you that, then it transformed when I was invited to lead United Against Racism Change Management. And I remember when they invited me, I literally said, and why are you asking me to do this? And I also heard immediately, why they're asking you to do this. And it was because this theologian, who was going through graduate school, and this love practitioner knew that this was work that was spiritual in nature and that required love as the transforming agent. And so not only was I transforming my team, I then started to transform and influence the entire organization. So being able to hold space, to name the reality of really difficult things, to be able to sit in the tension and look for the growth on the other side, to be open to people's stories and listen, and really, use that practice of proximity, just not looking at and talking at people from a distance, but really getting up close. So a lot of that changed. So, business was tough at different moments of that. I mean, we're talking about COVID and retail. Our stores were closed, right? A historic thing. But we could huddle together and say, all right, this is what we got. Where are we going? What do we need to lean into? What do we want to accomplish? And we could work together. It wasn't me, barking orders. It was literally us putting our brains together and ideating together. And so when it was rough, we had each other. When we made mistakes, we had each other. There was no fear. We did not operate in fear. And so I think that was a lot of it. And I share these reflections of my team members because they really are the ones who can tell the story. I've had people who have sent me notes to tell me that when I'm in their presence, when I'm holding space for them, that they feel loved. And these are notes at work. I've had a team member tell me how confident she had been and had never been in her entire career, confidence to be herself and to even take risks in a way she never would have before. I had another one who, was such an incredible change agent. And I always amplified her story and helped. To me, she was a role model of transformation. And so I was always amplifying her story. And she was somebody that was a little bit more reserved. And she sent me a note saying that what I was doing was world changing. And I had someone else that said, I always call her my right hand, who put on her running sneakers and ran with me as I transformed the business. She said to me, she's like, you always allowed us like this space of calm that we could wrestle with all the things together. There wasn't this, like you said, Lisa, this anxiety of, it was like, okay, what is it? We could name the things and we could, because we had space to be creative, we could come up with better solutions together. So, that's how I would kind of frame it through the words of those other people, for sure.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I want to grab a couple things you said there, go back, and then come forward. So this sense of being able to show up as calm, non-anxious, not operating out of fear. It doesn't mean that you never felt afraid, but that whenever the fears came up, it's like, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, I recognize that. We're going to do this other thing. And that all of that together, plus the proximity that you talked about, cultivates our feeling loved. I just think that's very powerful. And I think what I hear you saying is part of the reason that you were able to do that is because of all the work you had to do around your divorce. Mm-hmm. You said, okay, there are other things, other hard moments. We've all got the hard things. But for you, that was really pivotal. Yeah. I just want to acknowledge the vulnerability of sharing that and say thank you. It's a gift to be vulnerable there. Lisa and I have, in Life in Flux, we talked about these kind of twin navigational skills, waking up and letting go. And when I hear how you describe the process of divorce, like, I actually want my kids need to grow up in a space where they feel love. And it sounds like a bit of a waking up process, and then all the letting go. And then here's what I think I heard you say that I want to check, and then just get you to put a little bit more terminology or words around this, that the waking up and the letting go sort of led to this process of setting your compass to love, getting to know yourself, and that there was transformation in there that really shaped how you show up as this non-anxious, non-fear-based, proximate leader. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I mapping that?
Absolutely. I shared this with you before, but I'll say it again. One of my first big sermons was the study of love is an invitation to wake up. And and I'll say this, Lisa, for you to hear too, I've said this to Michaela 100 times, that Life in Flux for me is so akin to the love practice. Like, the language in Life in Flux really, really, really does capture all that I was intuitively doing, right? Because the beauty is I had no roadmap. And the blessing of this book is that people now have a roadmap. They have a navigational set of tools for the journey. And I didn't, but I was feeling it out. I was living the question. And so waking up for sure, waking up to say that I remember so clearly, because, faith will keep you somewhere if you think that you're doing something wrong. And I remember the moment I heard so clearly, you are no one's savior. And I was like, that was a wake up moment because now I realized I'm a part of the problem. And so waking up to that, to say, okay, what is it about me that thinks they are somebody's savior? And what is it that I have to let go to be able to move more freely? And so that for me was the invitation that gave me the capacity, the letting go, the surrendering, the willingness to say, I've been doing it this way all my life, but there's another way. There's a better way. There's a more excellent way. And even in the uncertainty, say, I'm going to follow that way. I'm going to set my compass to that way. And that's absolutely what it ended up being. And so letting go, I write about letting go a lot, a whole lot. And I think the biggest piece of it is that love for me, the reason why I focus on the theology and the practice of love is the center, to center into my belovedness. That gives me something that I can trust that is beyond me.
Yeah.
So it allows me to be able to let go, knowing that that the divine is at work. And the divine is this, that I'm no longer going to try to do this as self-reliant. One of the things I talk about in the love practice is that when we're faced with it, we often feel that it is impossible. And it is in our own strength, the self-reliance. So the surrender is into the God reliance and really putting our faith in
Jasmine,
practice.
What's really interesting here, Jasmine? Okay, so listeners, to hear Lisa's story, we asked Lisa these same questions. Go back to episode 2. But Lisa, for you, the letting go piece was huge too.
Yeah, it was very significant. For me, it sounded almost the same. One of my earliest childhood imprints and memories is a phrase that my mother said over and over again, which was, "Don't worry about Lisa, she can take care of herself." Right. And so that was who I was. I had to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. And not only that, because of my family history, I was also the most adult in the family many times. And so every situation I found myself in my personal life, in my career, I was the one that had to be omnicompetent, right? And the rescuer, right? And the person who could step in and take responsibility, because my own experience was that other people around me weren't quite so trustworthy. And what I had to let go of was, first of all, I had to check out, are they trustworthy or not, right? And regardless of whether they were or not, that wasn't mine to manage, right? And I hear a lot. The question I've been asking myself for quite a number of years now in situations that's I think fits and is aligned deeply with your love theology and practice is, what does love require of me in this situation, right? And I always go back to Paul's writing to one of his letters to the Corinthians, which is, and it's used in marriage services all the time, but it's really meant to be for the community, for how people are to be with one another. And he goes, all the things that love, is and isn't. But he, his introduction to that is, now let me show you the more excellent way. And it's the way of love, and not excellent in terms of perfection, but excellent in terms of, this is how Jesus came and showed up. and were to, model our steps after him, he was the fully embodied, love. And I just love that that's what you're all about. And you're bringing it into environments that probably are a little startled
Little.
by what you're offering. And I just love that. And I love how you care for your people. So I'm really just feeding back to you what I heard. I don't know that I have necessarily a follow-up question other than to say, where do you see this going, Jasmine? You brought us to where you are.
Yeah.
What do you see unfolding? Maybe Michaela wants to pause me there.
I want to add on to that. So where do you see this going? But I think what you said, Lisa, is exactly right, which is, okay, I'm sort of like, I even listen, every time I listen to you, Jasmine, I'm like compelled. I'm like, yeah, like I want to do this. This is how I want to be. And then I'm like, well, how? How in a digital work from anywhere, not that everyone's job is, how do I show up as a loving leader? To Lisa's question, where does this go from here? And I know you've actually put some framework around this. So can you give us I don't want to say super brief because we want you to tell us what it is, but can you give us the brief-ish version? I'm using ish a lot in this podcast so far, so we're just going to see where that goes, Jasmine. Brief-ish version of the Loving Leader framework.
Yes. I just want to say first, Lisa, that my question is, what would love do? That's always my question. What would love do? And I just also want to add contextually, I'm a New York City girl. I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in the midst of the crack epidemic, living not too far from the projects, in the violence of the drug industry. And I was also at a little Catholic school. And literally walking through that every day. And so
we shared the little Catholic school experience too, but we'll talk about that another day.
So many commonalities.
And so, a lot of the reason why that letting go was the hard part for me is because I was wired in a performative culture because there was a life to be led that wasn't going to be where you are right now. And it was all about excellent grades. It was all about being the best in the leader in everything that you are part of. It was about the trajectory of your life and the doing, all the things that you do. And, why I love the work of Life in Flux so much is because I didn't ever have language for inner work. What? That wasn't even within reach to understand that was possible. Now that same, little Black girl from the Bronx is a contemplative and a mystic today and a spiritual director and a business leader that drives the P&L. So it is a beautiful both and. So in terms of where it is going, one, I happen to be in this amazing Doctorate of Global Leadership cohort that is focused on the redemptive imagination of the marketplace. And my redemptive and maybe audacious imagination is love. And it's saying how does love transform the marketplace? And so the Loving Leader framework is essentially me looking at those 5 years at Reebok and saying, how did I show up? How was I being? And what impact was there? And, and I didn't share, but, we had some of the best financial performances that we've ever had during that season. And so I use a framework because people are always they literally scratch their heads when I say love and business at the same time. They don't even know what I'm talking about. I will also say that I am very much multilingual and that I am also a preacher and a minister. So I speak one language as a theologian or a practical theologian in one setting. And I also speak the language of the marketplace. And so it's not even that I'm always walking around saying, I love you at work. It is, I am being love. So the Loving Leader framework really kind of gives us 6 words to kind of guide us in for our own introspection, to give us a guidepost. It is what it is not is saying be like Jasmine. It is not that at all. It is saying this is the journey that I experienced and where it meets you and how that will help propel you to be a more loving leader. And so the L, I'm going to give you one word for each letter because there really are multiples, but I'm just going to go with one today to be brief. The L is for listen. My favorite, phrase from Paul Tillich is the first duty of love is to listen. And so listen deeply is the L. The O is for open. And open to me is open-hearted, open-minded, open to be changed by another story, an openness to listen, an openness to, the opposite, of course, is closed. And that's half of the challenge, when we're operating from stereotypes and things of that nature, is that we're closed to being changed from another story. The V is actually one of my favorites. That is also probably the most troubling for leaders, is vulnerable. And, to me, that looks like the fact that I don't lean into the hierarchy, that I am open to be changed by my colleagues' opinions and thoughts and views, and that it is this mutual iterative type of relationship as opposed to domination or control. The I is what is, so connected with hidden work, is the inner work. And the N is also one of my favorites, name the reality. Like, this is so not about gaslighting, but being, really finding equanimity in the reality of what is in front of us. And, without fear, being present and allowing us the space to navigate through whatever the context is. And then the last G is gift. The fact that we show up bringing our gifts, and we also see others as gifts, and we receive their gifts. So really, that whole idea of seeing people as gifts as opposed to objects, or, the marketplace does have a cultural history of dehumanization. And so this idea of seeing people as gifts as opposed to clogs, right, in my process, becomes a major shift in how we see and lead with love.
I love the framework, and I feel like we could do like 5 more podcasts just on that. So we'll pause there. I have a saying that's guided me in the work that I've done in organizations, and one of the things is to help people realize that humans are not resources. I hate the language of human resources, right? And humans are not resources; they're humans. So they are not a means to your end; they are an end unto themselves, amen. Right? And I hear that in everything. At the core is, how do we love people for who they are and what they bring. Last question, Jasmine. What if you, looking back on this, you've been on this incredible journey, particularly over the last 7 years. What would you say to younger Jasmine? I don't know. Pick a time, 20-year-old Jasmine, 30-year-old Jasmine, whatever one you want to name in your time. And what about what you do now? What's the one thing you would want her to know and maybe consider in her own journey?
My goodness. And I've had, I've written to myself in the past. And so there's so much that comes up as I think about that. But, if I think about it, particularly in the context of this conversation today, I would say you are enough. Exactly as you are. Mm-hmm. I would say you are a gift, that you don't have to conform to these crazy cultural norms that would have you believe that you are not worthy unless you accomplish this, you do this, you achieve this, you be this. That you yourself, exactly as you are a gift. And I talk to people all the time about, like, I totally understand how we've gotten here. I really have. And I have the deepest, utmost compassion, particularly for the journey of Black women in this country and how we have been objectified, how we have been wired for survival. And so I would say, baby girl, may you flourish. That's what I'd say.
Oh, Jasmine, even before you said that, the thing that I had written to myself to say to you in this last bit is, you are a gift. This conversation is a gift. Your work is a gift. Your vulnerability is a gift. Thank you for letting us have a little bit of a window into the work that we don't always get to see with leaders, this inner work, this often hidden work. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the hidden work of leadership. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it insightful. The Hidden Work of Leadership is brought to you by the Max Dupree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary, where we envision a world in which leaders across industries and seasons of life are deeply formed as the people of God so that they might seek the very best for the people and systems entrusted to their care. Our episodes are produced by Justin Heap, who ensures our engineering and editing is engaging and sounds just right. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. You can also follow the Dupree Center on LinkedIn and Instagram for updates and behind-the-scenes content. For more information about today's episode and access to additional resources, visit our website at dupree.org. That's DEPREE.org. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Hidden Work of Leadership.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to keep pressing into your own inner work, head to our website to download our free resource, Challenges, Crises, and Crucibles.